My name is Erica, and this is the story of how my life turned upside down in ways I never could have imagined. For over a decade, I'd been happily married to my husband, James. We had what I thought was a rock-solid relationship built on trust and mutual respect. I worked as a remote French tutor, a job I enjoyed despite its modest pay. James came from a well-to-do family, but that never mattered to us. His parents, however, were a different story. Richard, my father-in-law, was an influential executive director at the local hospital. His wife, Margaret, busied herself with various charitable foundations. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear they didn't approve of me. James had a brother, Michael, who was married to Emily. They had a 13-year-old daughter named Lily. Unable to have children of my own, I doted on my niece, often taking her for weekends and outings. Emily and I had become close over the years. During one of our coffee dates, she confided in me about the family's wealth. "Erica, you wouldn't believe the amount of property and money Richard and Margaret have given Michael and me," she whispered, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "We're talking millions." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Millions? Where did they get that kind of money?" Emily shrugged. "I try not to think about it too much. But sometimes I joke that we're secret millionaires who can't touch our fortune." I laughed along, but a nagging feeling settled in my stomach. Something about the situation felt off, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on my family and my work. Life continued this way for years, a delicate balance of family dynamics and unspoken tensions. Then, tragedy struck. Michael and Emily were killed in a car accident, leaving Lily an orphan. The funeral was a somber affair, but something about Richard and Margaret's behavior struck me as odd. They seemed distracted, almost annoyed by the proceedings, as if they had more pressing matters on their minds than grieving their son. As we stood by the graveside, I overheard Margaret muttering to Richard, "We need to sort out the paperwork as soon as possible. This complicates everything." In the days that followed, I threw myself into caring for Lily. The poor girl was devastated, and I wanted to do everything I could to comfort her. After much discussion with James, I approached him with an idea. "Honey, what if we adopted Lily?" I suggested one evening. "She needs a stable home, and we love her so much already." James considered it for a moment before nodding. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's talk to my parents about it." The next day, James and I visited his parents' sprawling mansion to discuss our proposal to adopt Lily. As we sat in their opulent living room, I couldn't help but feel out of place among the antique furniture and priceless artworks. "Absolutely not," Margaret snapped as soon as we broached the subject. Her eyes narrowed as she glared at me. "Erica is not suitable to be a mother to our granddaughter. We will raise Lily ourselves." I was stunned by the vehemence in her voice. "But I've been a part of Lily's life since she was born," I protested. "James and I love her, and we can provide a stable home." Richard cleared his throat, his expression cold. "This isn't up for discussion. Lily stays with us." Margaret leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Besides, we all know what this is really about, don't we, Erica? You're just after Michael's money. How convenient that you can't have children of your own, and now you want to swoop in and become Lily's guardian. Did you think we wouldn't see through your little scheme?" As we left the house, I felt a mix of anger and sadness washing over me. "I can't believe they'd accuse me of something so horrible," I said to James as we drove home. He sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm sorry, Erica. They're just protective of Lily. Give them time, they'll come around." But time didn't improve things. In fact, over the next few weeks, I noticed a change in James. He began staying late at work more often, always with some vague excuse about an important project. When he was home, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and exchanging messages with someone. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table in silence, I couldn't take it anymore. "James, is everything okay? You've been so distant lately." He looked up from his phone, his expression hard. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with," he snapped. I recoiled at his harsh tone. This wasn't like him at all. I'm your wife, I said softly. If something's bothering you, I want to help. Just drop it, Erica, he growled, pushing away from the table and storming out of the room. Hurt and confused, I tried to focus on the one bright spot in my life, my relationship with Lily. I visited her at Richard and Margaret's house as often as I could, helping her with her French lessons and providing a sympathetic ear for her grief. One afternoon, as Lily and I sat in the sunroom working on her conjugations, I overheard Richard and Margaret arguing in the next room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself straining to hear their heated exchange. We need to find a way to invalidate that trust fund, Richard hissed. $10 million, Margaret. $10 million that should be ours, not locked away for that girl. Margaret's voice was equally angry. Don't you think I know that? I've got the lawyers working on it, but it's not going to be easy. Michael made sure everything was ironclad before he died. I felt my blood run cold. They were talking about Lily's inheritance, the money Michael and Emily had set aside for their daughter's future. And they wanted to take it for themselves. That evening, I rushed home, prepared to tell James everything I'd overheard. But as soon as I walked through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. James was sitting in the living room, a stack of papers on the coffee table in front of him. We need to talk, Erica, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I approached James cautiously, the urgency of what I'd overheard momentarily forgotten. James, what's going on? He didn't meet my eyes as he pushed the stack of papers towards me. I want a divorce, Erica. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the sofa for support. What? Why? James, I don't understand. James finally looked up at me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. I've met someone else. She's beautiful, intelligent, and from a good family. Everything you're not. Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone and showed me a picture. A stunning brunette smiled back at me, her arm draped possessively over James's shoulder. They looked happy, intimate. This is Amanda, James said. We've been seeing each other for a while now. I need you to sign these and leave. Tonight. Tears blurred my vision as I mechanically signed where he indicated. I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out my insides and left me an empty shell. What about the house? Our stuff? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James waved dismissively. We'll sort out the division of property later. I don't have time for that now. Just pack what you need for a few days and leave the rest. I nodded numbly and headed to our bedroom, no, his bedroom now, to pack a bag. As I threw clothes haphazardly into a suitcase, I heard the front door open. James? Are you home, darling? Did you get rid of her? It was Margaret's voice, sickly sweet in a way I'd never heard before. Yes, Mom, James replied. Eric is packing now. She'll be gone within the hour. Margaret clapped her hands together. Excellent. You must bring Amanda to dinner tomorrow. Your father and I are dying to meet her properly. I retreated to the bedroom, feeling sick. How could they be so callous? So cruel? I finished packing in a daze, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, Margaret was still there. She didn't bother to hide her triumphant smile. Erica, dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm so sorry things didn't work out between you and James. Besides, don't bother coming around to see Lily anymore. It's best if you make a clean break. With those final, cutting words ringing in my ears, I stepped out into the night. The door closed behind me with a finality that seemed to echo the end of my married life. I found myself at a nearby hotel, checking in for the night in a fog of disbelief and pain. As I lay in the impersonal hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, I tried to make sense of how my life had fallen apart so quickly. The next morning, operating on autopilot, I found a small apartment to rent. It was nothing like the home I'd shared with James, but it would do. I threw myself into my work, teaching French lessons online from morning till night, anything to keep my mind occupied. A week after moving into my new apartment, my phone rang. It was Lily. My heart leapt at the sound of her voice. "Aunt Erica," she said hesitantly. "Are you okay? Grandma said you and Uncle James split up." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm okay, sweetheart. These things happen sometimes. How are you doing?" As we chatted, Lily hesitantly told me about James bringing his new girlfriend to dinner. "She's pretty," Lily said. "But she's not as nice as you. I don't like her." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I changed the subject, asking about her school and her friends. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Lily seemed nervous, on edge. Over the next few weeks, I tried to establish a new normal. One evening, as I was grading papers, my phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "Aunt Erica, I'm scared. Can we talk?" Alarmed, I immediately called her back. When she answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Aunt Erica, weird things are happening here." "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, concern flooding through me. Lily hesitated before continuing. "There are always these strange people coming to the house. They argue with Grandpa and Grandma a lot. They talk about money and something called a trust fund. It sounds like Grandpa and Grandma owe them something." My blood ran cold as I remembered the conversation I'd overheard about Lily's inheritance. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Lily, honey, I want you to be very careful, okay? Don't let anyone know you're telling me this." "I won't," she promised. "I've been recording some of their conversations on my phone. And I kind of got into Grandpa's computer and copied some files." I was shocked by her resourcefulness. "Lily, that's very clever, but also very dangerous. You need to be careful." The next day, I received an email from Lily. It contained audio files, photos, and documents she'd managed to gather. With shaking hands, I began to go through the material. What I discovered left me reeling. The audio recordings captured heated arguments between Richard and various individuals, all demanding repayment of large sums of money. The photos showed clandestine meetings in dimly lit rooms, with Richard handing over envelopes to shady-looking characters. But it was the documents that truly horrified me. Spreadsheets detailing the production and distribution of counterfeit medicines. Falsified lab reports. Forged prescriptions. It was all there in black and white. As I delved deeper into the files, I uncovered the true extent of the operation. Richard had set up a fictitious pharmaceutical company, using it to supply counterfeit drugs to pharmacies and clinics. Even worse, he was using these fake medicines in his own hospital, bribing doctors to cover up the deception. My hand shook as I closed my laptop. What should I do with this information? Going to the police seemed like the obvious answer, but I hesitated. What if James was involved? And what about Lily? She was living in that house, surrounded by these dangerous people. As night fell, I made a decision. Despite everything that had happened, I needed to talk to James. He deserved to know what his father was doing. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my heart pounding. After several rings, he answered. "Erica?" His voice was confused, wary. "Why are you calling?" "James, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about your father. There's something you need to know." He was silent for a few seconds, and then he asked me to meet. I agreed, and James gave me an address, a small cafe on the outskirts of town. As I drove there, my emotions were in turmoil. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. James was sitting in a corner booth, looking haggard and older than I remembered. As I slid into the seat across from him, I noticed dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that I'd never seen before. "Erica," he began, his voice low, "I've been working with the police for months. We're building a case against my father and his entire operation." I stared at him, stunned. "What? But, the divorce? Amanda?" James ran a hand through his hair. It was all part of the cover. I needed to distance myself from you, to keep you safe. Amanda is an undercover officer. We needed a way to get her into the family circle without suspicion. My head was spinning. So, our marriage, it wasn't real? No, Erica, James said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Our marriage was the only real thing in all of this. I love you. I've always loved you. Pushing you away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Tears welled up in my eyes as relief and anger warred within me. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. I couldn't risk it, James said, his voice pained. My father's network is vast. If there was even a hint that you knew something, you'd be in danger. I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you. As James continued to explain, I learned the full extent of the investigation. It wasn't just Richard involved, there were corrupt doctors, pharmacists, and even government officials implicated. The case was massive, with potential ramifications that reached far beyond our small town. But what about Lily? I asked, suddenly remembering my niece's fear. She's living in that house, James. She's scared. James's face darkened. I know. We're working on a way to get her out safely. But it's complicated. We talked late into the night. When we finally parted ways, James pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through, he whispered. When this is all over, I promise I'll make it up to you. I clung to him, savoring the feeling of being in his arms again. But as I drove home, a nagging worry settled in my stomach. Despite James's assurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was in immediate danger. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of my phone. Lily's name flashed on the screen, and my heart raced as I answered. Aunt Erica. Lily's voice was a panicked whisper. They're packing. They keep saying they need to get out before it's too late. I sat bolt upright, fully alert now. Lily, listen to me carefully. Are you safe right now? Can they hear you? I'm hiding in my closet, she replied. But I don't know how long before they. Suddenly, there was a commotion on the other end of the line. I heard Lily gasp, followed by the muffled sound of a struggle. Lily? Lily! I shouted into the phone, but the line went dead. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I threw on some clothes and rushed out of my apartment. I knew I should call James or the police, but there was no time. When I arrived at the house, I saw frantic activity through the windows. Shadows moved back and forth, and I could hear raised voices inside. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door and rang the bell. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, the door swung open, revealing Richard's surprised face. Erica, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice strained. I plastered on a fake smile. I left some of my things here when I moved out. I was hoping I could collect them. Richard's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but before he could respond, I heard Lily's voice from inside the house. Aunt Erica, help me. Without hesitation, I pushed past Richard and ran into the house. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Suitcases were strewn about, drawers left open, papers scattered everywhere. Margaret stood in the living room, gripping Lily's arm tightly. Let her go, I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. What happened next was a blur. Richard lunged at me, but years of yoga had made me quicker than he expected. I dodged his grasp and made a dash for Lily. Margaret, in her surprise, loosened her grip, and Lily broke free, running towards me. We almost made it to the door when I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. Richard had grabbed a heavy bookend and struck me. I stumbled, my vision blurring, but I managed to push Lily towards the door. Run, Lily! Get help! I shouted as I fell to my knees. The last thing I saw was Lily's terrified face as she ran out the door. Then, darkness engulfed me. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, I found myself bound to a chair in what looked like Richard's study. My head throbbed, and I could feel something warm trickling down my neck, blood. Richard paced the room, running his hands through his hair. We need to leave now. Before the police arrive. What about her? Margaret gestured towards me. Richard's eyes met mine, and I saw a coldness there that chilled me to the bone. We can't leave any loose ends. Suddenly, we heard the distant wail of police sirens. Richard and Margaret froze, panic etched on their faces. It's too late, Richard muttered. We need to run. Now. As they rushed to grab their belongings, I struggled against my bonds. The sirens grew louder, and I heard car doors slamming outside. Richard and Margaret were shouting at each other now, their carefully constructed facade crumbling in the face of imminent arrest. Just as I felt the ropes loosen, the study door burst open. James rushed in, followed by several police officers. Erica, he cried, running to my side and quickly untying me. As the police handcuffed Richard and Margaret, reading them their rights, James pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, he whispered. When Lily called me, I came as fast as I could. I sagged against him, relief washing over me. Lily? Is she safe? James nodded. She's outside with a social worker. She's shaken up, but she's okay. The next few days passed in a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and sleepless nights. I was diagnosed with a mild concussion from Richard's attack, but the doctors assured me I would recover fully. As I sat in the hospital bed, James by my side, we watched the news unfold on the small television in the corner of the room. The arrest of Richard, a prominent figure in our community, had sparked a media frenzy. Headlines screamed about the counterfeit drug king and the hospital of horrors. The scale of this operation is unprecedented, a grim-faced police chief announced at a press conference. We're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, and countless lives put at risk. As we were listening to the news, reliving the traumatic events, a knock at the door interrupted us. A tall, serious-looking woman in a suit entered the room. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I'm Detective Laura Chen. I'm leading the investigation into your father's operation. I was hoping I could ask you both a few questions. Over the next hour, we recounted everything we knew. James explained his involvement with the police investigation, while I shared the information Lily had gathered and the events leading up to my confrontation with Richard and Margaret. Detective Chen listened intently, taking notes. When we finished, she looked at us with a mix of admiration and concern. You've both been through a lot, she said. And I'm afraid it's not over yet. The trial is going to be long and difficult. Are you prepared for that? James and I exchanged a look. We'll do whatever it takes to see justice done, I said firmly. As Detective Chen left, promising to keep us updated on the case, another visitor arrived, Lily, accompanied by her social worker. Aunt Erica, she cried, rushing to my bedside and throwing her arms around me. I was so scared. I thought they were going to hurt you. I held her tight, feeling her small body shake with sobs. It's okay, sweetheart. You were so brave. You saved us all. But we have another long battle ahead of us. And long it was. The case dragged on for over 2 years, making headlines across the country. As I recovered and we tried to rebuild our lives, the trial loomed over everything. Finally, after months of testimony and mountains of evidence, the verdict came in. Richard and Margaret were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. All their assets, including the trust fund they had set up for Lily, were confiscated as proceeds of crime. As we left the courthouse after the sentencing, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? So many lives had been destroyed, including those of people I had once considered family. After the dust settled from the trial, James and I focused on rebuilding our lives. The most important part of that was Lily. We'd grown so close during the ordeal, and now it was time to make it official. The adoption process was a whirlwind of paperwork and interviews, but finally, we stood before a judge who declared us Lily's legal guardians. As we left the courthouse, Lily between us holding both our hands, I felt a surge of emotion. "We did it," I whispered to James, tears in my eyes. He squeezed my hand. "We're a real family now." With guardianship came the responsibility of managing Lily's inheritance from her parents. It was a daunting task, but we were determined to do right by her. "What do you think about renting out the house?" James suggested one evening as we pored over financial documents. I nodded. "Good idea. We can put the rent money into a savings account for her college fund." We threw ourselves into the task, finding reliable tenants and setting up a separate account for Lily's future. It felt good to be planning for her future, to be giving her the stability she deserved after everything she'd been through. As we settled into our new normal, James approached me one night with a nervous energy about him. "Erica," he began, taking my hands in his. "These past few years, they've been hell. But they've also shown me how strong we are together. I was wondering, would you marry me again?" I laughed, tears springing to my eyes. "Are you kidding? Of course I will." We decided on a small ceremony, just close friends and family. The day arrived, bright and clear. As I slipped on my bright blue dress, a color of hope and new beginnings, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Lily knocked on the door, already in her bridesmaid dress. "Aunt Erica? You look like a princess." I twirled for her, feeling light and happy. "And you look absolutely beautiful. Are you ready to go?" She nodded eagerly, taking my hand. As we walked down the aisle together, I saw James waiting for me, his eyes shining with love. It felt like our first wedding all over again, but better, because now we knew what we could overcome together. The ceremony was simple, but beautiful. As we exchanged vows, I looked out at our small gathering of loved ones, at Lily beaming beside us, and I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. At the reception, James pulled me close for our first dance. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Harrison again?" he murmured in my ear. I grinned up at him. "Even better than the first time." Later, as I watched Lily twirling on the dance floor with her friends, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our path hadn't been easy, but we'd made it through. We were stronger for it. The next week, I was back at work, tutoring my French students online. Life had returned to a kind of normal, but it was a new normal, one filled with love, laughter, and the joy of our little family. My name is Sarah, and I've always believed that family is the most precious thing in life. I'm married to my loving husband, Jack, and we have 2 wonderful adult children, our son, Michael, and our daughter, Emily. Michael followed in his father's footsteps and became an engineer, while Emily pursued her passion for art. I couldn't have been prouder of both of them. Emily's artistic career took off quickly after college. She organized exhibitions that drew quite a crowd, and I never missed a single one. I remember her first major show like it was yesterday. The gallery was packed, and Emily's paintings were the talk of the evening. As I walked around the gallery admiring Emily's work, I spotted her talking animatedly with a tall, handsome man. Little did I know then that this man, David, would become her husband and the father of my granddaughter. Their whirlwind romance was a joy to watch. David seemed to adore Emily, and she was happier than I'd ever seen her. They married in a beautiful ceremony just a year after they met, and soon after, Emily announced she was pregnant. I was over the moon at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. When little Sophia was born, I fell in love all over again. She had Emily's dark curls and David's green eyes, a perfect combination of both her parents. It was around this time that Emily made a decision that surprised me. She announced that she was quitting her job to work from home and raise Sophia full-time. "Are you sure about this, honey?" I asked her one afternoon as we sat in her living room, watching Sophia play with her blocks. "Your career was just taking off. I'd be more than happy to help with Sophia if you want to keep working." Emily shook her head, a determined look in her eyes. "I appreciate the offer, Mom, but I want to do this myself. I'm ready to sacrifice my career for Sophia. She needs me right now." I couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was off about this decision, but I respected Emily's choice. After all, she was a grown woman capable of making her own decisions. As the months passed, I noticed that Emily became more distant. Our regular coffee dates became less frequent, and when I called, she always seemed to be busy. As Emily drifted away, I found myself spending more time with Michael and his wife, Lisa. When they had their son, Tommy, Lisa asked if I could help out as a nanny. Of course, I jumped at the chance. And so, I threw myself into my role as Tommy's nanny. It was exhausting but rewarding work, and it helped fill the void left by Emily's absence. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if Emily was upset about the time I was spending with Tommy. I wanted to talk to her about it, but she kept avoiding my calls and canceling our plans. As Christmas approached, I held on to hope that Emily would reach out. I imagined us all gathered around the tree, Sophia opening presents with wide-eyed wonder. But as the days ticked by, that hope began to fade. On Christmas Eve, I sent Emily a message. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. We miss you and would love to see you tomorrow. Love, Mom." Hours passed, with no response. I tried to focus on the joy of having Michael, Lisa, and Tommy over, but Emily's absence cast a shadow over the festivities. Christmas morning came and still no word from Emily. As we sat around opening presents, I couldn't help but notice the empty spot where Emily, David, and Sophia should have been. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael asked, noticing my distraction. I forced a smile. "Of course, dear. Just thinking about how fast you've all grown up." But inside, I was seething. This wasn't just about missing a family gathering anymore. This was about crossing a line. After the presents were opened and the dinner was cleared away, I turned to Jack. "We need to go see Emily," I said firmly. "This has gone on long enough." Jack knew better than to argue when I used that tone. He nodded, and we began gathering gifts for Emily, David, and Sophia. As we pulled up to their house, I noticed that the curtains were drawn, and the Christmas lights that Emily usually put up were noticeably absent. My heart sank a little more. We approached the front door, arms laden with gifts. Jack rang the doorbell, and we waited. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours before we heard movement inside. The door creaked open, and there stood Emily. My heart nearly stopped at the sight of her. She looked different. Tired, yes, but there was something more. Her eyes, usually bright and full of life, seemed dull and weary. She was wearing long sleeves, despite the warmth of the house, and she held herself as if she was in pain. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We missed you at the family gathering, so we thought we'd bring Christmas to you." Emily's eyes darted nervously behind her before she stepped onto the porch, partially closing the door behind her. That's really nice of you, but you shouldn't have come. I'm not feeling well, and I didn't want to get anyone sick." It was then that I noticed the bruise on her arm, partially hidden by her sleeve. My motherly instincts went into overdrive. "Emily, what happened to your arm?" I asked, reaching out to her. She flinched away from my touch, pulling her sleeve down. "Oh, it's nothing. I had a little accident the other day. Slipped in the bathroom. Clumsy me." I exchanged a glance with Jack. We both knew she was lying. "Where's Sophia?" Jack asked, trying to peek inside the house. "We brought her some presents." Emily's face softened at the mention of her daughter. "She's napping right now. But I'm sure she'd love to see you. Maybe she could come visit you tomorrow?" I nodded eagerly, grasping at this olive branch. "Of course. We'd love to have her over." We chatted for a few more minutes, the conversation stilted and uncomfortable. Emily kept glancing back at the house, as if afraid someone would overhear. As we were about to leave, I couldn't help but pull Emily into a hug. She stiffened at first, but then melted into my embrace. For a moment, I felt like I was holding my little girl again. The next day, I woke up early, my mind still reeling from our visit to Emily's house. I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing Sophia's favorite foods and setting up some art supplies. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I rushed to answer it, finding Emily standing there with Sophia. My heart ached at the sight of my daughter, her eyes darting nervously as if expecting trouble. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Sophia's excited to spend some time with you." I knelt down to Sophia's level, opening my arms. "Hello, sweetheart. Grandma's so happy to see you." Sophia hesitated for a moment before running into my embrace. I held her tightly, breathing in her sweet, familiar scent. Emily handed me Sophia's backpack. "I've packed some of her things. I'll be back to pick her up this evening, okay?" I turned my attention to my granddaughter, determined to make the most of our time together. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go see what fun things Grandma has planned." We spent the afternoon drawing, baking cookies, and playing with dolls. It was wonderful to see Sophia laugh and play, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She seemed more subdued than usual, often glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst in. As we sat coloring together, I decided to gently probe. "Sophia, honey, is everything okay at home?" Sophia's crayon paused mid-stroke. She looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Mommy cries a lot," she said quietly. My heart clenched. "Why does Mommy cry, sweetheart?" Sophia shrugged, returning to her coloring. "Daddy yells at her. He says mean things." I tried to keep my voice calm, even as anger and fear surged through me. "What kind of mean things, Sophia?" "He says Mommy is stupid and can't do anything right. Sometimes he grabs her arms really hard." Sophia demonstrated, gripping her own arm tightly. We sat like that for a while, my mind racing. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I couldn't let Emily and Sophia continue living in fear. As the afternoon wore on, Sophia's play took a disturbing turn. She began acting out scenes with her dolls, making them yell at each other and push each other around. "Sophia," I said gently, "where did you learn to play like that?" She looked up at me, her face serious. "That's how Daddy treats Mommy sometimes." After Sophia's revelations, I couldn't sit idle any longer. I called Lisa, my daughter-in-law, and asked if she could watch Sophia for a few hours. She agreed without hesitation, sensing the urgency in my voice. "Jack," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination, "we need to go to Emily's house. Now." He nodded, his face grim. "I'll drive." The ride to Emily's house was tense, filled with unspoken worries. As we pulled up to their street, I suggested we speak to the neighbors first. "Maybe they've heard something," I reasoned. "It could give us a better idea of what's really going on." We approached the house next door, and a middle-aged woman answered. Her eyes narrowed as we introduced ourselves as Emily's parents. "We're concerned about our daughter," I explained. "Have you heard any disturbances from their house? Any arguments or screaming?" The woman's face hardened. "I haven't heard a thing," she said dismissively. "They seem like a perfectly normal couple to me." Her arrogant tone set my teeth on edge, but I thanked her politely. As we walked away, Jack squeezed my hand reassuringly. We were about to knock on Emily's door when we heard it, David's voice, raised in anger. "Why did you let Sophia go to your mother's? You know, I don't like her spending time there." My blood ran cold. Jack and I exchanged a look of horror before I jabbed the doorbell, my heart pounding. The shouting abruptly stopped. Moments later, David opened the door, a pleasant smile plastered on his face. "Sarah, Jack, what a surprise. What brings you here?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. I peered past him, my eyes widening as I saw Emily struggling to her feet. Without a word, I pushed past David and rushed to my daughter's side. "Emily, sweetheart, are you all right?" I asked, checking her for visible injuries. She nodded weakly, avoiding my gaze. Anger surged through me as I turned to face David. "How dare you treat my daughter like this?" I hissed, my voice low and dangerous. I know what's been going on here, and I won't stand for it any longer. David's facade cracked for a moment before he regained his composure. I think you've misunderstood, Sarah. I'm simply trying to raise my wife properly. She can be quite difficult sometimes, you know. Raise her? I spat. She's your wife, not your child. And there's nothing proper about abuse. David's eyes narrowed. Why don't we ask the neighbors? They'll tell you everything's fine here. In that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. The neighbors were complicit in this abuse, turning a blind eye to Emily's suffering. I think it's time for you to leave, David said coldly. I need some time to cool down. We can discuss this misunderstanding later. Before I could protest, he was out the door, leaving us alone with Emily. As soon as he was gone, Emily broke down. Through her tears, she began to reveal the full extent of her ordeal. David had forced her to quit her job, isolated her from family and friends. He controlled her every move, checking her phone and taking away her car. He told the neighbors I was a bad wife and mother, she whispered. That he was raising me to be better. They all believed him. I became an outcast in my own neighborhood. My heart shattered as I listened to my daughter's pain. I held her tightly, vowing silently that I would do whatever it took to get her and Sophia out of this nightmare. He's gone to get more alcohol, Emily said, fear creeping into her voice. He'll be back soon. As we began to plan our next move, I knew we were in for a fight. But looking at my daughter's bruised but hopeful face, I knew it was a fight worth having. No matter what it took, we would free Emily from this cycle of abuse and bring her home where she belonged. I turned to Emily, my voice firm but gentle. Sweetheart, I want you to pack your things and Sophia's. You're coming home with us. Emily's eyes widened with a mix of hope and fear. But Mom, what about David? He'll be so angry. Jack stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. That's his problem, not yours. I'm your father, and I'll protect you. Both of you. With trembling hands, Emily began to gather their belongings. I helped her, moving quickly and efficiently, knowing time was of the essence. Within minutes, we had packed the essentials into 2 suitcases. As we left the house, I could hear murmuring voices. A group of neighbors had gathered near the gate, their eyes following us with disapproval. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face pinched with judgment. You should be ashamed, she spat at me. You've raised your daughter poorly. She should be grateful that her husband tolerates her and takes care of her and the child. Anger surged through me. Without a word, I gently took Emily's arm and pushed up her sleeve, revealing the dark bruises that mottled her skin. Is this what you call taking care? I asked, my voice ringing out in the sudden silence. Would any of you like to be raised like this? The neighbors' faces flushed with embarrassment, and they quickly dispersed, avoiding eye contact. We hurried to the car, Jack helping Emily with the suitcases, while I kept watch. Just as we were about to leave, I spotted a familiar figure running towards us. David, I gasped. He was red-faced with rage as he reached the car, immediately grabbing for Emily. What do you think you're doing? He snarled. Before I could react, Jack was there, pushing David away from the car door. Don't you dare touch her, he growled. Stay away from my daughter. David's eyes darted between us, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. The situation was escalating quickly. We need to call the police, I said, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. As I dialed, Jack ushered Emily into the car. We quickly locked the doors, our hearts pounding as David circled the vehicle like a predator. You can't take her, he shouted, kicking the car in frustration. She's my wife. I spoke calmly to the 911 operator, explaining the situation while keeping an eye on David's increasingly erratic behavior. Emily sat in the back seat, her face pale with fear. It's okay, sweetheart, I reassured her. The police are on their way. We're going to be fine. Minutes felt like hours as we waited, David's shouts growing more desperate. I could see neighbors peeking out of windows, witnessing the scene but doing nothing to intervene. Finally, we heard sirens in the distance. David's face contorted with panic, and for a moment, I thought he might try to run. But he stood his ground, a defiant look in his eyes as the police cars pulled up. The arrival of the police brought a momentary sense of relief. Officers quickly assessed the situation, examining Emily's visible injuries and taking statements from all parties involved. The tension in the air was palpable as David was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car. "He'll be detained for a few days while we investigate," one of the officers informed us. "We'll need you to come to the station to provide a formal statement, Mrs. Thompson." Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Emily bravely recounted her experiences to the police, her voice growing stronger with each retelling. I stayed by her side, offering support and corroborating her story where I could. However, our hope for a quick resolution was dashed when David's lawyer presented a united front of neighbors, all claiming that Emily and David had a perfectly normal relationship. "She's always been dramatic," one neighbor testified. "David's a saint for putting up with her." Their words made my blood boil, but I reminded myself to stay calm for Emily's sake. Determined to prove Emily's innocence, we agreed to a lie detector test. I held my breath as she answered question after question, her voice steady despite the stress. When the results came back confirming her truthfulness, I felt a surge of vindication. A psychological evaluation followed, revealing the depths of Emily's trauma. "Your daughter is suffering from severe depression, likely stemming from prolonged domestic abuse," the psychologist explained to me privately. "She'll need ongoing support and therapy." Despite the mounting evidence, David remained adamant about his innocence. His latest threat to seek full custody of Sophia sent Emily into a panic. "He can't take her, Mom," she sobbed. "I can't lose my baby." That's when I knew we needed to dig deeper. I hired a private detective, hoping to uncover something in David's past that would expose his true nature. Weeks passed as the detective worked tirelessly. Emily and Sophia stayed with us, slowly beginning to heal in a safe environment. Watching my daughter rediscover her smile was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Finally, the detective called with news. "Mrs. Thompson, I found something you need to see." The information he presented was shocking. David had a history of domestic violence in another city. He'd been ordered to undergo therapy but had fled the state before completing the program. "There's more," the detective said grimly. "I've collected testimonies from other victims. The pattern is always the same: charm, control, then violence." As I leafed through the files, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger at David for causing so much pain, relief that we finally had concrete evidence, and sadness for all the women who had suffered before Emily. "Thank you," I said to the detective, my voice thick with emotion. This changes everything." The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. I sat beside Emily, squeezing her hand reassuringly as we waited for the proceedings to begin. Our lawyer, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Henderson, arranged the stack of evidence before her. As the judge called the court to order, I could see David across the room, looking smug and confident. That confidence, however, began to waver as Ms. Henderson presented our case. "Your Honor," she began, "I'd like to present evidence of Mr. David Thompson's history of domestic abuse." One by one, she laid out the detective's findings, police reports from David's previous city, incomplete therapy records, and testimonies from past victims. David's lawyer objected vigorously, but the judge overruled him, allowing the evidence. Then came a moment that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Ms. Henderson called forward a witness, Sarah, David's ex-girlfriend from 7 years ago. Sarah's voice trembled as she recounted her experiences. "He would fly into rages over the smallest things. The bruises. I had to cover them with makeup every day." Next, Ms. Henderson presented Emily's lie detector results and psychological evaluation. "As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Emily Thompson's account has been verified by multiple professional sources." The coup de grace came in the form of voice messages David had left on Emily's phone. His threatening voice filled the courtroom. "If you ever try to leave me, I'll make sure you never see Sophia again." Just when I thought we'd presented everything, Ms. Henderson surprised us all. "Your Honor, we have one more witness. With the court's permission, I'd like to call Sophia Thompson to the stand, accompanied by her child psychologist." My heart clenched as I watched my 5-year-old granddaughter walk to the front of the courtroom, her small hand clasped in the psychologist's. Sophia's eyes were wide, but her voice was clear as she spoke. "Daddy would yell at Mommy a lot," she said. "He would push her and say mean things. It scared me." Then came the moment that left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. Sophia's psychologist presented a video to the court, a shaky, dimly lit clip that Sophia had recorded on her mother's phone one night when she'd been woken by shouting. In the video, David's enraged voice could be clearly heard, along with the sound of something shattering and Emily's frightened pleas. As the video ended, I could see tears in the judge's eyes. David sat slumped in his chair, all pretense of innocence gone. The judge's verdict came swiftly and decisively. David was sentenced to prison for domestic abuse, with mandatory counseling. Emily was granted a divorce, awarded 50% of their shared property, substantial financial compensation, and full custody of Sophia. David was barred from any contact with Sophia until she turned 18, and even then, only if she chose to see him. As the gavel fell, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Emily collapsed into my arms, sobbing, not from fear this time, but from sheer relief. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. "It's finally over." As we left the courtroom, I saw David being led away in handcuffs. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw something I never expected: regret. But it was too little, too late. As I stood in my kitchen, preparing a feast for our weekly family dinner, I couldn't help but smile. The house was filled with the cheerful noise of my grandchildren playing, the aroma of roasting chicken, and the gentle hum of conversation from the living room where Emily and Michael were catching up. It had been 6 months since the court hearing, and the change in our family was palpable. The dark cloud that had hung over us for so long had finally lifted, replaced by a warmth and joy that I had feared we might never experience again. Emily and Sophia had moved in with Jack and me after the trial. At first, I worried it might be challenging for all of us to adjust, but those fears quickly dissipated. Having them close allowed us to provide the support and love they needed to heal. Sophia, my brave little granddaughter, was making remarkable progress. The nightmares that had plagued her in the early days after leaving David had become less frequent. Now, more often than not, I would hear her giggling with her cousin Tommy as they played elaborate make-believe games. "Grandma, look," Sophia called out, running into the kitchen with a drawing in her hand. "I made this for you." I wiped my hands on my apron and knelt down to examine her artwork. The page was filled with bright colors, a stark contrast to the dark, scribbled drawings she had produced in the months following the trial. This picture showed our family, stick figures with big smiles, standing in front of a yellow house, with a rainbow arching overhead. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Why don't we hang it on the fridge?" As I stood up, I caught sight of Emily watching us from the doorway, a soft smile on her face. The change in her was just as remarkable as Sophia's. The haunted look in her eyes had faded, replaced by a spark of life that grew brighter each day. "Need any help, Mom?" she asked, stepping into the kitchen. "You can set the table if you'd like," I replied, gesturing to the stack of plates on the counter. As we worked side by side, I marveled at how natural it felt. These simple moments of domesticity, once taken for granted, now felt like precious gifts. Emily had started drawing again, something she hadn't done since the early days of her marriage to David. Her studio, once Jack's old office, was filled with canvases. I had watched her art evolve over the past months, mirroring her healing journey. The first pieces had been dark and chaotic, all harsh lines and somber colors. But gradually, light began to creep in. Now, her latest works were explosions of color and life. "I have some exciting news," Emily said as she laid out the silverware. "The gallery downtown wants to feature some of my new pieces in their upcoming show. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful," I exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." Emily beamed, her eyes shining with a confidence I hadn't seen in years. She had recently started working part-time at a local art supply store, slowly reintegrating into the workforce. It was a small step, but an important one in reclaiming her independence. As we all gathered around the dinner table that evening, Jack, Michael, Lisa, Tommy, Emily, Sophia, and me, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. The road to this moment had been long and painful, but looking at the smiling faces of my family, I knew it had been worth every struggle.